When my father died, the house went quiet in a way that never healed. He left behind a small farm, 2 savings accounts, and one promise, that everything would be shared fairly between me and his second wife, Linda. He had married her 5 years after my mother passed away. I was 18 then, polite but distant. Linda smiled too much at people and never once at me. After the funeral, I found her in the study, pretending to cry while checking papers through her tears. She said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Your father made sure you're taken care of." I believed her for 1 week. Then bills started arriving with my name misspelled and a signature that wasn't mine. The lawyer who had handled my father's estate stopped answering calls. When I finally reached him, he sounded nervous. He said, "Everything was transferred to Mrs. Turner, temporarily." Temporarily. That word kept echoing until it sounded like theft wearing perfume. I went to Linda. She sat by the fireplace in a silk robe that could buy groceries for months. She said, "You're young. You don't need land. I'll keep it safe for you." I said, "It's my father's will, not your wallet." Her smile disappeared. "Watch your tone, girl. You're lucky I don't throw you out tonight." That night I packed my few clothes and moved into a friend's small apartment. I had no inheritance, no proof, only memories of my father saying, "I left enough for you to study, travel, and live free." Now freedom looked like a cracked ceiling and a borrowed blanket. Days turned into weeks. Linda sold the farm tractor, the cows, even the old pickup Dad loved. I saw pictures online, real estate listings calling our home newly renovated property owned by successful widow. She was successful because she stole everything built by a man who trusted her. I wanted revenge, but anger without evidence is just noise. So I searched quietly. I started by visiting the town clerk's office. The lady there said the deed transfer looked rushed, and handed me a copy. The signature at the bottom was my name, but the curl of the L was wrong. Someone had forged it. I took the paper to a notary who had witnessed my father's original will. He frowned. "Your dad was clear. Half for you, half for her." I stamped it myself. If this says otherwise, something changed after he died. He gave me his old record book showing the first document number. The one Linda filed had a different number sequence entirely. Proof. Not enough for a miracle, but enough for a fight. I called the lawyer again, this time recording the call. When I asked why he approved a false signature, he panicked. He said, "Linda offered to double my fee if I processed it fast. She said you'd already agreed." My hands shook, but my voice didn't. "Thank you," I said. I spent that night scanning every file, printing every message, learning words like fraudulent conveyance and estate forgery. Revenge was no longer about anger, it was about precision. When I filed my complaint in the local court, the clerk read my name and smiled slightly, maybe recognizing courage in someone who looked broke but wasn't beaten. The hearing date was set for Monday. On Friday evening I walked past my old house. Linda was hosting guests, laughing under lights that my father had installed. She raised a glass. I raised my eyes to the sky and whispered, "You'll answer to him, and to me." Because sometimes the smallest proof can shake the richest hands. And she was about to find out how heavy truth can be when it finally arrives in court. The weekend before the hearing felt longer than any year of my life. I had printed every document twice, highlighted every line that carried my father's name. The air in my tiny apartment smelled of ink and instant coffee. Every page I touched was a reminder of how deeply trust can be betrayed when money enters love. On Saturday morning I walked to the town bank. The manager, a gray-haired man who had known my father, frowned when he saw me. "Linda already closed those accounts," he said. I asked, "Can I at least see the last withdrawal signature?" He hesitated, then turned his monitor toward me. The signature was smooth and neat, too neat. My father's handwriting had always trembled slightly since his surgery. And yet here, it looked like it was written by a printer with a fountain pen. I requested a certified copy. He said, "Be careful, child. People like her don't lose quietly." I smiled faintly. Neither do people like me. That night, I received an email from an unknown address. Drop the case. It will end badly for you. No name, no signature. I printed it and stapled it to my evidence file. Fear deserves a page too, so you remember what you overcame. Sunday I went to the cemetery and cleaned the dust from my father's headstone. I told him everything, the missing money, the forged papers, the lies. I whispered, "Dad, I'm not fighting for the land. I'm fighting to keep your truth alive." The wind blew softly, like approval. On Monday morning I walked to the courthouse with my folder hugged to my chest. Linda arrived in a bright red coat, diamonds flashing, pretending the cameras outside were hers. She gave a fake smile and whispered as she passed me, "You really want to embarrass yourself?" I replied, "Truth doesn't embarrass people, it exposes them." Inside, the courtroom was small but cold. I sat at the petitioner's desk while Linda and her lawyer, Mr. Harris, took the opposite side. The judge, a calm woman with glasses and silver hair, looked over our files. "Miss Turner," she said to me, "you're representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." She nodded with quiet respect. "Proceed when ready." I stood up, palms sweating, voice steady. My father's will stated that half his property and assets were to go to me, his only daughter. But after his death, the entire estate was transferred solely to his second wife, Linda Turner, without my consent. The documents contain a forged signature and false transaction numbers. Then I placed the copies of both deeds on the judge's desk. Linda's lawyer rose quickly. "Objection. These so-called differences can be explained by clerical error." I turned to him. Clerical error doesn't change handwriting style. And it doesn't pay extra fees to lawyers for silence. The judge lifted an eyebrow. "Is that accusation supported?" "Yes, Your Honor." I recorded Mr. Harris admitting to an illegal payment from Mrs. Turner. The courtroom went silent except for Linda's sharp inhale. The judge leaned forward. "Is that recording available?" I handed her the flash drive. Linda's face drained of color. Her lawyer whispered something fast, but she pushed his hand away. She said, "This is ridiculous. She's jealous because her father loved me." The judge didn't react. She just pressed play. The sound of Harris's nervous voice filled the room. Linda offered to double my fee if I processed it fast. She said her stepdaughter had agreed. When it ended, the judge asked quietly, "Mrs. Turner, do you deny that?" Linda tried to speak but no words came. For the first time, she looked small. The judge said, "We'll reconvene tomorrow after reviewing the recording." Court adjourned. As people left, Linda avoided my eyes. I picked up my folder, my hands no longer shaking. For years I had felt like the invisible child. Now the whole room had seen me. Justice wasn't finished yet, but for the first time, it was listening. The next morning the courthouse felt different, heavier, as if the walls themselves knew what was coming. I arrived early, holding the same folder that had become my armor. Reporters were waiting outside, small-town gossip now turning into a headline. Linda came 15 minutes late, dark glasses on, pretending confidence. But her lipstick couldn't hide the fear sitting behind her smile. Inside, the judge entered, calm as always. "We will continue the case of Turner versus Turner," she said. Her voice cut through the whispers like a blade through silk. Linda's lawyer, Mr. Harris, spoke first. "Your Honor, we'd like to clarify that the recording played yesterday may have been edited." The judge interrupted softly, "Mr. Harris, the court received the full original file with timestamps from your firm's email server. Shall I read the chain?" He froze. The gallery chuckled. Then the judge turned to me. "Miss Turner, please continue your presentation." I stood up, my heartbeat steady like a drum. "Your Honor, I'd like to present the bank statement from the week of my father's passing. These withdrawals, signed under his name, happened 2 days after his death certificate was issued." Gasps filled the room. The judge looked sharply toward Linda. "Mrs. Turner, Can you explain these transactions? Linda opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't answer. I walked forward and placed a small paper on the table. My father's death certificate. The dates don't lie, I said. Her lawyer tried again. It must be an accounting delay, Your Honor. The judge shook her head. Delays don't sign documents. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then the judge looked at me and said, "Please continue." I pulled one more sheet from my folder, an old letter my father had written to the bank, naming me his secondary account holder. "I found this in his study drawer," I said softly. It was dated 3 weeks before he died. The judge examined it carefully, then nodded. "This aligns with everything you've presented." Linda's mask finally cracked. Her eyes darted toward me, wild and cornered. "You think you deserve it all? You never cared for him. I was there every night while you were out living your free little life." I didn't answer. The judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Turner," she said firmly, "you will control yourself." Linda slumped back, shaking. I continued, "Your Honor, I don't want more than what's rightfully mine. My father worked his whole life for fairness. He wouldn't want deceit to be the last chapter of his name." The judge nodded. "I will review all materials and give a decision by afternoon." She struck her gavel once. "Court is in recess." Outside, I walked into sunlight that felt too bright. Reporters surrounded me, asking questions I didn't answer. One of them asked, "What if you lose?" I said, "Then at least the truth won't." As I turned to leave, I saw Linda standing near the courthouse steps, her hands trembling as she lit a cigarette. She said under her breath, "You ruined me." I looked at her and said quietly, "No, you ruined yourself the day you chose lies over love." Then I walked away. Back at my apartment, I sat by the window and looked at the box of old photographs. My father's smile, the farm, the pickup truck. Everything she had sold. I whispered, "Tomorrow it ends." But just as I closed my eyes, my phone buzzed. It was the court clerk. "The judge asked you to return early tomorrow morning," she said. "There's new evidence that arrived anonymously." I froze. "From who?" She said, "No name. Just a note. For the girl who still believes in truth." I hung up slowly, heart racing. Someone out there had sent something. Maybe the final piece. For the first time since my father's death, I smiled without fear. Because justice wasn't luck. It was patience waiting for its turn. The next morning, the courthouse was full before the doors even opened. Word had spread, new evidence, shocking twist, the widow might break. I arrived early again, holding nothing this time except calm. When you know the truth is finally walking beside you, you don't need armor anymore. The bailiff opened the court doors. The judge entered, expression unreadable. "Miss Turner," she began, "the court received an anonymous envelope yesterday evening. It contained a signed statement, a photograph, and 2 financial documents. Have you seen these before?" I shook my head. "No, Your Honor." "Then you may want to listen carefully." The judge held up the first paper. "It's a signed confession from Mr. Harris, Mrs. Turner's lawyer, acknowledging he participated in the forgery of Mr. Turner's will in exchange for a personal payment of $15,000. Gasps filled the courtroom. Cameras flashed. The judge continued, "He has since surrendered to the ethics board and resigned his license." Mr. Harris stood, face white, hands trembling. "I was pressured, Your Honor. She made me do it." Linda turned sharply toward him. "Liar. You said it was safe." Her voice cracked. The courtroom buzzed like electricity. The judge raised her hand. "Order." Then she picked up a photograph from the file. "This image," she said, "was taken at a local bank the morning after Mr. Turner's death. It clearly shows Mrs. Turner standing beside an unknown man at the teller counter, holding withdrawal forms under Mr. Turner's name." The picture appeared on the screen. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. "That's not me." The judge narrowed her eyes. The bank security system timestamp matches the withdrawal receipts submitted yesterday. And the man next to you, identified as your cousin, is now cooperating with investigators. Linda's red coat from the day before suddenly looked like blood on silk. She whispered, "No, no, this isn't real." I sat still, heart pounding but face calm. The judge turned to her one last time. "Mrs. Turner, do you wish to deny this under oath?" Linda's lawyer started to speak, but she raised her shaking hand. "No," she said in a broken voice. "It's true." The courtroom erupted. Some gasped, others whispered prayers. She slumped back in her chair, eyes glassy, tears sliding down her face. She tried to stand, then sank again, sobbing quietly. The judge's voice softened but stayed firm. "Mrs. Turner, you have committed multiple counts of forgery and theft of estate property. This court orders the immediate restoration of all assets belonging to Miss Turner, including land, bank accounts, and any property sold under false ownership." Then the judge looked at me. "Miss Turner, your father's will is hereby reinstated exactly as written. Half of his estate belongs to you, effective immediately." For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stared at the wooden table in front of me, feeling my throat tighten. When I finally looked up, the judge was still watching me kindly. "You fought with truth," she said. "Not everyone does. Don't waste what he left you." I nodded, my eyes wet. "I won't, Your Honor." Behind me, Linda began to whisper to herself. "He loved me, he loved me." Then her body slumped forward on the table, sobs turning into gasps. The bailiff rushed over, but the judge signaled, "Let her be." The courtroom fell silent. It wasn't triumph anymore, it was something deeper, like a ghost finally laid to rest. Outside, reporters swarmed, asking how it felt to win. I said quietly, "I didn't win. The truth did." When I reached home that evening, the sunset washed the sky in gold, the same color my father used to paint the barn. I held the official papers in my hands and whispered, "Dad, it's done." For the first time in years, the house in my memories didn't hurt to picture. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just breathes and lets you go home. 2 months later, the farm smelled of rain again. The grass had grown wild, and the wind no longer carried anger. I stood by the old fence where my father used to lean when he talked about dreams bigger than our land. For the first time, I could breathe without bitterness. The court had restored everything. Half the land, half the accounts, even my father's pickup. But I didn't rush to sell or celebrate. I hired back the 2 workers Linda had fired, paid them fair wages, and asked them to rebuild the broken fence. They looked at me like they were seeing a ghost turned real. One of them said, "Your dad would be proud." I smiled softly. That's all I ever wanted. Linda moved out of town. People said she lived with relatives near the coast, quiet and alone. I didn't send police after her when she missed a restitution payment. The judge asked if I wanted to file for contempt. I said, "No. Some debts collect themselves." Instead, I built something my father never got to see, a small learning center beside the barn, where kids from the town could study finance and law basics for free. I wanted every girl who got ignored or underestimated to know what a signature meant, what ownership meant, and how not to let anyone steal their name. On the wall, I framed the old letter my father had written to the bank. At the bottom he'd signed, "For my daughter, so she never needs permission to dream." Whenever I read it, I felt his hand on my shoulder. One evening, as the sun lowered behind the field, a letter arrived. It was from Linda. No return address, just my name on the envelope. Inside were 2 short lines written shakily in blue ink. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know, he did love you." No apology could rebuild what she destroyed, but somehow those words removed the last stone from my chest. I folded the note and placed it beside my father's photo. The farm grew quiet again, but this time it wasn't empty, it was peaceful. I sold part of the harvest and donated the money to the local orphanage. They named a reading room after my father. When I visited, I saw a little girl tracing the letters of his name with her finger. I realized then that legacy isn't money or property, it's what remains kind after you're gone. That night, sitting on the porch with the crickets singing, I whispered, "Dad, we did it." The stars above looked like they were nodding back. I thought of everything we'd lost, everything I'd learned, and how truth had its own heartbeat, slow but unstoppable. People in town still talk about the case sometimes. They call it the widow's fall, like it was just another scandal. But for me, it was something else entirely. It was proof that silence can speak, that honesty can rebuild, and that even when you stand alone, truth will find its way through. I kept one photo of Linda, taken years ago, smiling beside my father. I don't hate that picture anymore. It reminds me that love makes mistakes, but real strength fixes them. Before going to bed, I walked outside one last time. The moonlight touched the roof, the same house where betrayal had started. Now it was just a home again. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Some stories end in revenge. Mine ends in peace." Then I turned off the porch light, walked inside, and finally slept without fear. Because justice had spoken. And truth had stayed.